In this video, I will guide you through a journey of self-forgiveness so that, in just a few minutes of reflection, you can achieve the clarity needed to stop punishing your past with the wisdom you only possess today. Every day you spend using your spiritual awakening as a whip against your former self is one less day of peace and presence in your now. This cycle of self-censorship consumes the vital energy you need for your true transformation. As someone who has walked the path of soul listening and self-knowledge for decades, I've learned that true maturity isn't born from perfection, but from how we embrace our ruins. Perhaps you feel that your mistake was unforgivable or that your evolution is lagging behind, but the truth is that you couldn't have acted any other way with the consciousness you had at the time. Stay with me until the end, as we will perform a symbolic practice of timeless reconciliation to release your heart from this unnecessary weight. As we awaken to a new consciousness, it's common to encounter a hidden pain, the void of feeling behind in our own evolution. We look back and feel the weight of the should-haves. I should have been more patient. I should have realized sooner. But what if I told you that life isn't a performance review, but a sacred succession of states of presence? Today, we are going to transform guilt into reverence for the path traveled, understanding that your wisdom chose the autumn to bloom. We begin our journey by diving into one of the greatest illusions of the human mind, the paradox of time. We look at our past through the eyes of someone who has already crossed the desert, yet we demand that the person at the start of the trail have the same vision as the one who has already reached the mountaintop. Why do we demand maturity from someone who didn't have scars yet? The marks you carry today aren't just memories of pain. They are the navigation tools you didn't possess back then. At this point, African wisdom offers us a healing perspective through the thought of Mogobe Ramos. In Ubuntu philosophy, the self is not something static or finished. Being is a becoming. Ramos teaches us that existence is a continuous flow, and that our humanity is woven through our relationship with time and others. In this light, your past self wasn't a wrong turn, but a sacred stage of this vital flow. You are who you are today because those previous versions, even in their innocence, haste, or failure, held the thread of life so you could reach this moment. Self-forgiveness, therefore, is the recognition that your current wisdom is the direct daughter of that old ignorance. The hidden pain of feeling behind in your own evolution is, in reality, a mismatch of frequencies between the ego that judges and the life that flows. As deep psychology teaches, individuation requires us to accept all of our phases. Honoring the path you've traveled is understanding that every stumble was a step taken in the dark toward the light you hold today. And it is precisely this walking through shadows that brings us to the altar of maturity, where we discover that the blooming of the soul doesn't follow the calendar of human urgency, but the silent wisdom of time itself. There is a force that chooses the autumn to reveal its most vibrant color. There is a silent wisdom that chooses the autumn to bloom. At the altar of maturity, we understand the concept of the synchronicity of error, the perception that the mistake wasn't a system failure in your life, but the very raw material of your being. Without that detour, you wouldn't have developed the spiritual muscle necessary to carry the truth that now dwells in your heart. We use the metaphor of the seed. It doesn't know the majestic tree it will become, yet it trusts fully in the darkness of the soil. Your past was your time in the earth, of silence and pressure. Often, what we call a mistake was just the seed breaking its own shell so it could grow. We now propose a lucid action, a contemplative practice to embrace the self that was just trying to survive. Visualize this old version of yourself. Instead of pointing a finger, reach out a hand. Recognize that that person did the best they could with the emotional tools they had. By accepting the imperfect, you sanctify your present and allow life to flow without the shackles of regret. However, for this fluidity to remain, we must identify the saboteur who insists on tightening those shackles, our own ego. It is the ego that creates the knot of spiritual self-censorship, turning awakening into a courtroom. At this point in our walk, we need to untie the knot of spiritual self-censorship. The ego's greatest trap is using your current awakening as a whip for your past. It is a subtle form of spiritual vanity to believe you should have been perfect from the start. This judgment isn't wisdom. It's just the ego trying to maintain control through punishment. The psychology of awakening shows us the crucial difference between ethical responsibility and emotional punishment. Responsibility leads us to repair and growth. Punishment keeps us trapped in trauma. When you forgive yourself, you aren't ignoring what happened. You are releasing the energy that was stagnant in guilt. Adopting a systemic view, we realize that the kindness we show our past immediately alters the frequency of our present relationships. If you are an executioner to yourself, you will inevitably be a harsh judge of others. By embracing your own shadow and your old failures, you emanate a vibration of acceptance that heals not only your story but the entire field around you. This deep acceptance gives back something the world tried to steal from us: our sacred right to be eternal learners. We need to reclaim the duty of not knowing before it's time, because life, in its essence, is not a performance exam. We reiterate here your sacred right to be a learner. Life is not a performance exam with grades and approvals, but an infinite succession of states of presence. Not knowing is not a lack. It is an empty space where life can manifest itself. Having known sooner would have prevented the depth you have now, because wisdom that doesn't pass through experience is just empty theory. In daily life, the greatest enemy of peace is the trigger of comparison. We compare our backstage, full of doubts, with the lit stage of others, or with an idealized version of who we think we should be. This addiction to feeling insufficient steals the only moment where life happens, the now. Remember, the master only exists because the learner had the courage to make mistakes. Honor your not knowing phase. It was the fertile soil where your search for meaning was planted. By accepting your journey of learning, you regain command of your inner peace. But accepting the learning also means accepting the moments of falling. Often, for this peace to become solid, the old self needs to crumble. It is in the silence of necessary ruins that our naked truth finally emerges. Sometimes, the old self needs to fall so that the truth can emerge. We use here the symbolic narrative of the Kintsugi of the soul, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Your scars and your regrets, when bathed in the light of consciousness, become the most beautiful and valuable parts of your story. Beauty resides precisely in the mending of those who have already had the courage to break and rebuild themselves. It is necessary to allow ourselves to grieve the versions of ourselves we left along the way. Often, regret is just unprocessed grief for who we were. But living philosophy teaches us that the acceptance of the imperfect is the only fertile ground for a real, down-to-earth spirituality. Without the acceptance of our ruins, our spirituality is just a performative facade. Ruins are not the end. They are the space where the new temple will be built. When you stop trying to hide your broken pieces, you discover that it is precisely through those cracks that the light of the soul can shine for the world. However, even in the face of the beauty of these scars, the rational mind tries to retake control, creating new cells with the stones of what we just learned. This is where the tyranny of should is born, a mental prison built with the bricks of newly acquired knowledge. The human mind is an expert at creating prisons with newly acquired knowledge. It is the unconscious pattern of addiction to insufficiency. As soon as we learn something new, we immediately punish ourselves for not applying it 10 years ago. But how could you apply the light if you were still submerged in the necessary shadow of experience? The concept of transcendence here is simple yet profound, silencing the internal judge so we can hear the master born in experience. The master doesn't shout orders. He whispers invitations to presence. By abandoning should, you open space for is. And what is now is your capacity to be conscious and kind toward your story. we propose an invitation to silence, a pause to dissolve the narrative of past incompetence. Breathe and feel that the weight you carry doesn't belong to your being, but only to the narrative your mind created. You are the sky where the clouds of regret pass. You are not the cloud. And when the sky of consciousness clears, we finally stand face to face with who we truly were. It is time to cease the internal war and perform the definitive gesture of healing, the timeless embrace between all your versions. Imagine, now, this meeting between the wise elder and the impulsive youth. We reach the apex of our journey, the timeless reunion. Imagine the encounter between the wise elder you are becoming and the impulsive youth you once were. This youth doesn't need judgment. They need protection and care. The ethics of self-care is the fundamental basis for any compassion we wish to offer the world. True forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened, but about looking at the past without the weight of condemnation. It's understanding that the one who made a mistake was just trying to protect you the best way they knew at the time. When the adult who has healed embraces the child who failed, time dissolves and a new frequency of peace is established in your spiritual DNA. This embrace is the closing of a cycle of pain and the beginning of a cycle of presence. You are no longer fragmented between who I was and who I am. You are a continuous and sacred flow. Peace is born the moment you decide you no longer need to fight against your own story. We have reached the end of this reflection, but the invitation for your soul is only beginning. What if the pain that confuses you today is actually the language of your soul trying to guide you to a freedom you've never experienced? Tonight, before you rest, place your hand over your heart and be still. Visualize a golden light connecting your chest to your past. Say silently, I release you from the weight of my perfection. I honor you for the path that brought me here. Feel the release of that invisible knot that gripped your chest. And what if the pain you feel today is truly the portal to the life you've always sought? The void is not an absence. It is the womb where your new self has just been born. If these words touched something inside you, perhaps it's time to take one more step on this path of reconnecting with your inner truth. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue receiving content that nourishes the soul with presence and authenticity. Share in the comments what resonated with your heart. Your story might be the mirror someone else needed to find to also set themselves free. If you seek a safe harbor, know that our community is the sanctuary where fertile silence is shared and deepened. Enjoy the channel's posts. And to keep expanding this field of presence, we suggest the video pinned in the card. May it be a source of inspiration on your journey. Peace and light.